Let's go live to New York. Jim Kennedy standing by. Jim was the Deputy Press Sec to Bill Clinton, Director of Comms for the Vice President Al Gore. Jim, appreciate your time again after our marathon coverage yesterday. You've had a bit of time to reflect on the numbers. Why was it such an emphatic win for Donald Trump?
Well, it's a fascinating election. It is probably the biggest drubbing of a Democrat since going back to Michael Dukakis in 1988. And I think there's a multitude of factors here. I think the economy is probably the biggest factor because it really weighed heavily on the whole country and really drove votes towards Trump. Excuse me. And
that's okay. Well, can I ask you?
That.
Yeah, carry on. Yep.
Sorry, too much travel lately. If you complicate that with the immigration issue as well, that really makes it a really tough hill for her to climb. This was really a referendum on the Biden-Harris administration, and that really kind of hobbled the campaign from the beginning.
Yes, so that goes to my next question. Because she was vice president and that the argument, you've been there 4 years, why couldn't you have had an impact? If there was a contested primary, I know it's hypothetical and it's a big if, but should that have been the case, that there was a contested primary, you get the scrutiny, the coverage, the awareness, the profile, and not necessarily the baggage of the current administration?
That's right. I think there were two problems this year. First of all, I think President Joe Biden should have decided not to run for re-election at the beginning, and that could have created a really wide open field for a successor to emerge. It might have been the vice president, and she would have been a better candidate for that process if she did. But he did not do so until after the debate, and that created a really short runway. I still think they would have benefited by opening up the process, even if she emerged from it. But they, for whatever reason, chose to plow ahead and avoid a kind of a competition. And then I think it was compounded by the fact that she didn't really take much time to introduce herself. Even though she had been vice president, people really didn't know what she stood for or what she represented. So she avoided media scrutiny, as you recall, at the beginning and throughout much of the campaign, and never had a full-blown news conference. So I think that was a mistake, because not only was she held back by the record of the administration she was part of, she didn't craft a new identity.
Yes, indeed. And then you had Trump with a very clear identity and a perception as the businessman and as well of his first term that the economy was in better shape at that time. So that ended up being so pivotal, I guess, for many Americans who feel like they are not better off 4 years later.
Yeah, it was a rare election in that people really had a chance to look at two administrations, the Trump administration and the Biden-Harris administration. You have to go back to Grover Cleveland, who was president for one term, and then Benjamin Harrison took over, and then Cleveland ran again. So people could look at Harrison's record and Cleveland's record, and they chose Cleveland again. Same thing kind of happened here, where people felt better under Trump than they did under Biden and Harris. Trump probably would have won re-election if it were not for COVID. COVID really, I think, helped Biden win 4 years ago. But then in retrospect, people still remember the state of the economy and the border security issues more fondly in retrospect.
Finally, we reported earlier, I broke the news the Prime Minister had spoken to Donald Trump. He's had a phone conversation with him, congratulated him on the win. Do you think this is going to be an issue, the fact that Kevin Rudd has been critical of the ambassador to the United States, that Kevin Rudd has been scathing of Donald Trump previously? The Prime Minister's made remarks quoted in the last week, nowhere near as strong, just saying he was scared by the prospect of what Donald Trump could deliver. That's not as big an issue, but with the ambassador, how hard will that be to navigate, or is Trump transactional enough to say, okay, they're willing to move on and be constructive, let's do it?
Well, I don't think it helps the relationship. Those were past comments, but scathing nonetheless. I'm sure it will be remembered. So it's not a great thing to have happened, but I think hopefully, America's interests and Australia's interests become dominate here and overcome those barriers. But it is a potential problem.
Jim Kennedy, live from New York. Thanks so much for your time today and over the last 48 hours. Appreciate it.